Hi, it's Katie at the Fabric Squirrel, and today hopefully I'm going to show you how to make some festive placemats. Apologies if I am not sharing this in time for Christmas, but I'm hoping that won't matter because these are the placemats that I'm hoping to share with you today. And this is the mock-up that I've done, and I'm going to talk you through the process because it actually turned out well first time. I have used a fabric collection from the Crafty Lass, and it's her first Christmas collection. I absolutely love her work, and I have made something, I think now, with every one of her collections. So this year it was table mats. I would love to make a table runner to match, but I am lowering my expectations in time for Christmas. The reason why I'm not too worried if I either don't get these finished in time or share this with you is because they do come with a slight twist. And that is that I have made them double-sided. This isn't the first time I've done this. I've made a double-sided table runner before. So one side is Christmas and then one side is just like a tropically, like jungly theme. I get it out of we're having Mexican, for example. But I really love the colours of this Liberty collection, and I thought they were beautiful spring colours. I liked that the sagey type greens go really well. So I've used my organic sage solid. That goes really nicely with the collection. But then the sage also goes really well in this collection. And so the binding is what pulls it together. So although they look completely different, they have got that one colour in common that means that you can do this. So I hope this inspires you to make double-sided mat. I have used Bosal placemats. These ones are 13 by 18 inches and they've got the slight curve to them. They're quite hard. They are washable. I really love them. Bosal are a brilliant brand. I use them all the time if I'm making bags. And these are doubles, both sides are fusible. So I have quilted on top on one side, but that wouldn't work going through both layers. So this side is literally just fused on and then stitched in place around the edge with the binding. Let's get to work and I will show you how I put this together. The mat is 13 inches tall, so I am going to make these pieces 13 and a half because it gives me a little bit of room to play with. So for this, for the shorter side, I have done it 6 3/4 inches. And for this side, it's 12 1/4 inches. When it comes to things like this, I always talk in inches because all my rulers are all in inches. So it is probably the only time that you'll hear me automatically not do centimetres. So yeah, I need 4 of these. I've already cut this one and the one that's made up. And what I've decided to do is I'm going to do 2 that are green and 2 that are white because I just think it's a shame not to use this print from the collection, quite frankly. So that is the one that I'm going to cut with you now. I've given them a bit of a press before. Six and 3/4. So I'm going to do 2 and 2 of these, 2 green ones. And it is 13 inches tall, but again, I'm going to make it 13 and a half. Took me a while to decide which side to put it on, but I think being on the left makes the most sense. So the next job is to sew these together. Now they're sewn together, I'm going to give them a good press. I have pressed it to the red side because I feel like it'll be less obvious, and just going over some of those creases again. I've flipped it and then I've given it another press on this side as well, just for good luck. I've got my Bosal mat and now I'm going to fuse it to one side. Even though I don't have the fabric ready on the back yet, that's not going to be a problem. It's not going to be hot enough to fuse it to my ironing board, so do not worry. Just line this up so there's an even amount all the way around the edge and there's no of the white showing. I've given it a good iron all over and now it's ready for the next step. I use the Christmas bouquet fabric for the applique. With my steam turned off, I've ironed bondweb to the reverse of this fabric, just over the main parts that I know that I'm going to cut out. And now it's just a case of cutting out the different bouquets of flowers that I want to include on the mats. I've done some that are larger, like this bit, but then I've also just cut some of the smaller leaves out as well. Peel the back off the bondweb and then start arranging the flowers until you're happy with where it sits. Remember, there was a bit of an overlap around the edge and you're going to need to leave room for the binding, so don't do it too close to the edge. When you're happy, you just need to iron them into place. Just be really careful if you've got some smaller bits because you don't want to push them out of place. Lower your feed dog if you have one of these buttons. It means that when you're free motion, it's not going to pull the fabric through and you're free to move it in any direction. Just have fun with this bit, don't overthink it. I've gone with red over the flowers and green over the leaves, and I have just gone round the edge in a really rough way, but I find this really therapeutic. Here it is done. I just need to go around with the snips and get rid of all of these loose threads. Time to just go around the edges now and trim them. That's it for your Christmas side. Now it's time to leap forward to spring and do the Liberty side of your placemats. I wasn't sure how much I was going to need, so I just went with 2 strips of each of the fabric. So they're 2.5 inches wide, and I've done full bolt whips straight off the bolt, but you can order from me in long quarters if it's easier than fat quarters. This is the Liberty Quilting Cotton, and it's Heirloom 5, this collection. Well, actually, there are 4 from Heirloom 5, and then there is one which is from a different collection. It's that mauve one that you can see second down in the pile. It works so well with this collection that I've just included it in the placemats as well. You need 5 rows of the sage fabric. Now, I worked that out to be about 32 centimetres, so that's just over a long quarter. I also use this for the binding, so I think you'd be safer off ordering about 1 metre of the plain fabric that you're using to combine the 2 collections together. You need 36 rows in total, just for ease, and so you have a little bit to play with. I've done 8 of each of the prints, so these are 8 inches tall and 2.5 inches wide. In the sage you need 36 again, and these are 2.25 inch by 2.5 inches. And then to give the staggered look, the other side slightly bigger, so it's 3.25 inches by 2.5 inches, and again you need 36 of these. Now you need to sew a 2.25 inch strip of sage and a 3.25 inch piece of sage to each of the Liberty prints. I just did one at a time. I always chain stitch these, so I always start with a bit of a scrap piece of fabric to help me pull through that initial one and to stop any gathers, and just keep sewing. Snip all those chain threads, and then it's time for ironing it. So I decided to iron towards the sage and away from the Liberty print, and I've just done that on all of these. Now it appears that I have forgotten to record a step, and that is sewing all the strips together. So basically you just need to come up with an order that you're happy with. They don't all need to be the same for each mat. Sew them all together and then press them onto the other side of the Bosal mat. Flip the mat over and then just trim off all those tiny bits that are hanging over the edge and around those corners. Now I always make my own bias binding. If you have a quilting ruler, you'll see that you've got a 45-degree angle mark on there. So line that up along one of the edges and you can see that I have cut a 45-degree angle through some of the sage fabric. For the 4 mats, I needed 300 inches of bias binding. In centimetres or metres, that's about 7.5 metres. Because I'm cutting it at a diagonal, it's hard to say how many strips of that is, so you just have to do some maths at this point. It's time to sew those short edges together for all your binding. I've used a 1/4 inch seam allowance throughout this, by the way. I don't think I've mentioned that yet. And again, I've used my scrappy bit of fabric to start me off so I don't end up with a gather at the first stitch. If you haven't got one of these bias binding tools yet, then you are going to need to add it to your wish list. It makes life so much easier. Mine, I think, came in a set of 4. So all you do is just push the end through. I've used like an old sewing needle to help push it through the ends. Sometimes the start can be a little bit fiddly, but once it's through, you just then need to iron it in place. What I do is I'll just start it off like this and then I'll just leave my iron there and pull it through. It is like magic and it will be a game changer. Before I added the binding, I have just run a top stitch really close to the edge all the way around just to make sure that there's nothing that moves and I don't get any tucks or anything in the fabric. If you're a hand binder, you are not going to like this step. The Bosal mats are way too thick to do it by hand, so you are going to need to machine stitch your binding on. Doesn't really matter which side you do first. I've gone with the Liberty side. I've left a tail and then just sewn one side to the Liberty side all the way around. The corners are a little bit fiddly. It's too thick to put any pins through and you can use clips, but I just find they get in my way. So I'd rather just go slowly and just do it very carefully by eye without any clips or anything. But do what you prefer. Leave a few inches gap when you get to the end and don't trim that tail just yet. This bit is a bit fiddly, so bear with me. With that first edge, I have just straightened it off. Now with the bit that I've cut off, I've kept it to one side because we need to make this overlap 2.5 inches wide, which is the same width as the binding. So I've used the bit that I cut off as a guide and then I've placed the other side over the top and then I'm just going to cut so I know that that overlap is the same width. I have slowed this down so hopefully you can see how I have pinned it together, and we need to sew this diagonally now. So it is quite tricky because this Bosal is hard and it makes it quite hard to manoeuvre, but you just need to sew that diagonal strip and hopefully then your binding will sit neatly. Check that it sits flat and then just trim off that excess. And now you just need to stitch down that bit that has been left open. Now you need to turn that binding over to the other side of the placemat. This bit is a little bit fiddly, but I find it really satisfying because you can just see it all coming together. I have used clips at this point though, because you just can't get away with doing it by hand and it does make it a lot neater. Time to stitch that binding into place and just take the clips off as you go. I finished them just in time for Christmas, and in the craziness I completely forgot to get any decent videos or photos, but here they are, and hopefully I'll make some matching table runners and I'll get some better videos of the finished result.